The Knights Templar were cleared of heresy. That should have ended the case. Instead, it created a problem no law could solve. Once the Church absolved the Templars, it removed the one justification kings had been waiting for. Guilt was gone, but the pressure remained. This is the part of the story that is almost never told. Not what the Templars were accused of, not how they were arrested, but how an institution was erased after being cleared without breaking the appearance of law. After the Chinon hearings in 1308, the legal situation was straightforward. The highest leadership of the Knights Templar had been reconciled with the Church. They were restored to communion. In medieval canon law, this was not symbolic. It was final. A charge of heresy, once absolved, could not simply be revived. No second trial could be convened without new evidence. No verdict could be reversed without admitting error. From a legal standpoint, the case was closed. And that was precisely the problem. Because the political situation did not change with the verdict, the kings of Europe did not become less threatened. The debts did not disappear. The independence of the order did not soften. The absolution solved the legal question. It intensified the political one. This is where the Church found itself trapped between two incompatible realities. On one side was canon law, clear and binding. On the other was pressure from monarchs who no longer cared about guilt. They cared about control. Once absolution entered the record, conviction became dangerous. Condemning the Templars would have required proof that no longer existed. Admitting that proof was false would have exposed the Church itself. So the solution was neither conviction nor acquittal. It was something else entirely. Silence. Delay. And finally, a change in language. By the time the Council of Vienne convened in 1312, the outcome was already being shaped. Not through argument, through phrasing. No new witnesses were called, no fresh evidence was introduced. There was no formal vote on heresy. No council member stood and declared the Templars guilty of doctrine. This absence is critical because it tells us what the Church was trying to avoid. A verdict creates responsibility. A verdict creates precedent. A verdict demands justification. What happened at Vienne was not a verdict. It was an administrative decision. The Pope announced that the Knights Templar would be dissolved, not condemned, not convicted, suppressed. That word did all the work. Suppression did not require proof of guilt. It did not require a finding of heresy. It required agreement that the order had become a problem. The Church did not say the Templars were false. It said they were unsustainable. This distinction allowed the institution to disappear without admitting error. Canon law remained intact. No doctrine was overturned. No confession was invalidated. The Church could claim it had followed its own rules. Even as the result contradicted the trial, this was not justice, it was management. Once suppression replaced condemnation, everything changed. Property could be reassigned without calling it punishment. Members could be dispersed without calling it exile. Silence could replace explanation. More importantly, responsibility could dissolve. No single authority carried the blame. No single decision could be challenged. The outcome existed everywhere, yet belonged to no one. This is why suppression is more powerful than condemnation. Condemnation ends arguments. Suppression ends memory. This is why the Council of Vienne matters more than the arrests. It was the moment procedure replaced truth. And it worked. Jacques de Molay remained alive during this limbo. He had been absolved. He had been reconciled. By law, he should have been free. Instead, he remained imprisoned, waiting inside a system that no longer intended to resolve his case. When he was finally brought before a public commission in 1314, the rules had shifted again. He was not asked to defend the order, he was asked to repeat his confession. When he refused, the system reached for its final maneuver. A man who retracts a confession after absolution could be labeled a relapsed heretic. That label bypassed the earlier ruling. It did not contradict Chinon, it stepped around it. Jacques de Molay was executed not for what the Templars were accused of, but for refusing to cooperate with the fiction that the case was still open. His death was not a judgment, it was a warning. Once suppression became the tool, the consequences spread quietly. The destruction of the order did not follow a single pattern. It followed advantage. Where kings benefited from erasure, it happened quickly. Where they did not, enforcement softened. This unevenness was not a flaw, it was the design. A universal heresy would have required a universal response. Suppression required none. Each ruler could adapt the outcome to local needs. Assets could be absorbed, networks could be preserved, silence could be maintained, and silence was the goal, because silence creates space for forgetting. After the order was dissolved, the most damaging evidence did not surface. It vanished. Internal records disappeared. Financial documents fragmented. Correspondence ended abruptly, not burned publicly, not catalogued, simply removed from circulation. If nothing was hidden, why did so much disappear? This question matters more than any missing relic, because institutions that vanish cleanly do not leave contradictions. The Knights Templar left many. The Chinon parchment itself was not destroyed, it was buried. That choice tells us everything. Destroying it would have implied guilt. Preserving it quietly allowed the Church to claim continuity. The document existed, but it did not circulate. Public memory hardened around accusation. Official memory remained sealed. This separation allowed myth to grow where explanation was denied, and it protected the institution that had authorized both. The true legacy of the Templars is not treasure, it is precedent. After 1312, no major institution was allowed to exist entirely outside state control. Military orders were restrained, financial systems learned to fragment, authority learned discretion. The lesson was absorbed without being announced. You do not need to prove guilt to erase an institution. You need consensus, you need procedure, and you need patience. The Knights Templar were not destroyed in defiance of the law, they were destroyed through it. By using silence instead of sentences, by using suppression instead of condemnation, by choosing language that dissolved responsibility. What makes this mechanism so enduring is that it does not rely on force, it relies on process. Suppression creates outcomes without moments. There is no single decree to protest, no sentence to overturn, no verdict to appeal. Responsibility disperses across committees, councils, and language itself. By the time the consequences are visible, the decision is already everywhere and nowhere. This is why suppression is so difficult to reverse. You cannot argue against silence, you cannot cross-examine phrasing, and you cannot put an institution on trial when no one claims to have judged it. The Church did not need to lie, it needed to speak carefully. By avoiding a declaration of guilt, it avoided a future obligation to explain itself. By avoiding condemnation, it avoided admitting the trial had failed. What remained was an administrative outcome that could be defended indefinitely as necessary. This technique did not end with the Knights Templar. It became part of institutional memory. A way to resolve conflicts without resolving truth. A way to remove problems without creating martyrs. A way to end stories without closing the record. That is why the Templars continue to feel unfinished. Not because of what they may have found, but because of how they were handled. Their erasure did not answer questions, it prevented them from being asked, and that is the most effective form of power. This is why the story does not end with fire, it ends with paperwork, with phrasing, with records that stop mid-sentence. The Knights Templar were cleared, and then they were erased, not because the system failed, but because it adapted.